for everyone out there who's
Here
watching.
Here we
go. Ooh, that's nice.
Hi, everybody. Meteorologist Joe Cioffi was on a little while ago, but we are going to do a special edition tonight. My colleague, meteorologist Joe Rao, here at Fios 1 News. We are going to do some analysis and updating and a few other things. Well, you know, Joe, I got to tell you, of all the storms this winter, this one has really been the toughest one of all.
Yeah, you know, I was thinking back in the day, back in the 60s and 70s, when weather forecasts were, would put out a forecast for snow. You'd start out with, let's say, 1 to 3 inches, then they'd wind up upping, and before you know it, it was up to like 12 to 18. And you say to yourself, those days are behind us now. But then you look at a scenario like what we're looking at right now, and with the models, the computer models, literally all over the place, and changing every 6 hours. If you look at the intermediate progs and everything else, and you say to yourself, oh, look, they've just doubled the amount. So, oh, look, they took it all away, or whatever. And here we are. It's now we're literally less than 12 hours from the event, and we're still frustrated.
Well, I think part of the frustration, in my view, is I think due to the fact that we don't have a lot of experience with big storms this time of year. This is the beginning of spring here. We don't, usually by this time in many winters, we've already seen the last one of the season, and this time around, totally different. Again, very rare that we could that we see storms like this now, and a lot of us don't have. We do have some experience when we have to deal with things like snow during the daytime during the month of March and sun angle and so on, but not when we're dealing with something that's got the possibility of producing many inches of snow.
Well, there's only two that stand out in my memory immediately, and we're talking about storms that come after astronomical spring, and those two are the storm of April 6, 1982, which dropped 9 or 10 inches of snow in New York City. It was also the first day of the baseball season. Yankee Stadium, the Yanks were expected to open the season and could not because of all the snow. That was one case. And then the other, which many people in northern Westchester and the lower Hudson Valley well remember, they rue the memory of this, the April Fool's Day storm of 1990, let's see, what year was it? It's all coming down. 1997. Had a brief mental lapse there for a second. And that one dropped like 1.5 feet of heavy, wet snow on much of the Hudson Valley, and many people were out of power, as we saw a couple of weeks ago, for many, many days in the aftermath. But those are the only two that jump out in my mind as far as post-winter or new spring storms.
I don't know. I have a map up of all the warnings and the advisories that are up, and I've been trying to rack my brains out, trying to remember the last time we've had winter storm warnings up for the whole I-95 corridor. It's been quite a while. Washington, Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York City, Hartford, Providence, Boston, all in winter storm warnings out of this. And I can't remember the last time that happened.
Right. In fact, I think during the Snowmageddon year, I think that was, 2010, 2011, Washington and Baltimore, for example, got hit very, very hard. But the New York metropolitan, I think Staten Island saw a few flurries. Yeah. So we cut off that. And the one that jumps out in my mind from memory was 1983. The megalopolitan snowstorm from Washington to Baltimore on to New York, Philadelphia, up to Boston, 1 to 2 feet. But that was more than 30 years ago. I'm sure there have been others since, but only the ones that, and when you get to be our age, you can't remember everything.
No, we can't. We can hardly remember anything.
Jump out in your mind.
Yeah, I did some fast updating on snow totals over the course of, because we've got snow going on right now in central and southern New Jersey, snow, sleet, and it's also been snowing fairly hard across a good portion of south central Pennsylvania. So I'm stuck in this area of a foot plus when it's all said and done. I'm not going to try to pick a top side out of this. It's just too difficult. And, I kind of nudged up, I had 6 to 10, so I kind of nudged it up to 8 to 12 in that band that we have up through central New Jersey, the coastal areas in New York City. I'm trying to figure out this whole heat island thing for New York, for the urban areas, because the last storm, we had heavy snow all around the urban areas, but in the urban areas itself, they got maybe 20 to 30% of the snow, or even less than what they got within 20 miles of that.
Right.
And, as we go north and west, I think we can agree that those amounts are going to tail off relatively sharply. I might be a little too aggressive on the northwest side, but you know what, for now, just let it go. I'm going to, we're going to bust for somebody someplace.
Well, I did some calculations earlier today. I didn't post them anywhere on Facebook or on the web or whatever, but it's interesting to point out that at 9:30 in the morning, the sun is at the same altitude that it's at midday on the first day of winter, 26 degrees above the horizon. Now, if you take your fist and you hold your fist out at arm's length, if you have an average hand, I'm not talking about if you're Andre the Giant or Bronco Nagurski or whatever, but if you have an average hand, your fist at arm's length is going to subtend to about 10 angular degrees. So we're talking about the sun being roughly 2.5 fists up from the southern horizon at noontime on the day of the winter solstice. Now the sun is 50 degrees high at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. That's 5 fists up. So we're talking about the sun now being twice as high in the sky at midday as opposed to the beginning of wintertime. And that much higher sun angle certainly would go a long way. As I mentioned yesterday, I think the infrared and ultraviolet radiations from the sun get through the clouds, interact with the paved and asphalt surfaces, and they work together to help to melt the snow.
Right.
And it may very well be that there may be accumulation on the roadways, but it certainly would not be as much as, let's say, on the grass or on trees or on the top of your car or whatever. And with that high sun angle, that makes it a very problematic situation to try to figure out exactly how much is going to fall where on what surface.
The two variables for tomorrow that we don't know until we have them is how hard is it going to snow, and what are the temperatures going to be. And one of the big differences this time around is that we are unlike the other storms where we went into the storms warm and had to rely on dynamic cooling from the upper atmosphere.
Right.
The bottom part of the atmosphere is cold. And that may make a difference. Instead of snowing at 33 or 4, this time around we may be snowing at much lower temperatures. I'm looking at some of the spots in south central Pennsylvania, for example, around Lancaster at 29 at Pottstown. A lot of the temperatures in interior Pennsylvania there are down in the upper 20s and low 30s. A lot of stations reporting light snow and sleet. In New Jersey, Newark has sleet. We don't have any sleet here when I went out my door here in southern Westchester. Somerville, Allaire, Toms River, all reporting snow and sleet. Mount Holly, Trenton. Nobody's reporting any big restrictions in visibility. So the precipitation seems to be on the light side for the most part, but there's probably some heavier stuff falling down that perhaps is missing on the observations. These were the observations, by the way, at 7 o'clock. And here's the radar. The northern edge of that is hitting dry air where we are, and we're not getting into it, but you can see the echoes to the south. That stuff is definitely all reaching the ground.
Right, that's storm number 1. There's actually 2 storms, and the second storm is going to wait for an upper level system to merge with it late tonight and tomorrow morning, and that will intensify and rev the storm up. And just like 2 weeks ago, Joe, 2 weeks ago, we were promoting the fact that the heaviest and steadiest and most intense activity would occur between 1 and 7 o'clock in the evening. That was Eastern Standard Time. We're now saying 2 to 8, and that's Eastern Daylight Time. But it's interesting that now, once again, for the second time in 2 weeks, we're looking at a storm that really is going to show its true colors here in terms of intensity during the afternoon into the early part of the evening hours. Everything leading up to that, certainly tomorrow morning, for example, most of you who have to go to work will probably be driving either in snow or maybe snow mixed with sleet. But once we get past noontime, we should see everything turn over to mostly snow. And then it's going to be a matter, as you just mentioned, Joe, of intensity. How intense will the snow come down? A very intense snowfall, and we saw that 2 weeks ago. manage to accumulate even on paved surfaces. This time around, I'm not quite sure if it's going to be as intense as what we saw 2 weeks ago. And again, in those 2 weeks, the sun has gained a little bit more in altitude in the sky. So that's the thing that is really the big question mark is just how heavy will the precipitation be,
right,
and whether or not the additional increase in solar altitude will help to keep accumulations down or lower accumulations, at least on paved surfaces.
I brought up the NAM, and one of the things I want to bring up right off the bat, because I know this is the off hour, the in between part of the run. They did have planes drop with drop zones, so they've been there's new data that's in the mid cycle run,
which they don't
now,
often do.
which they don't often do. So it might be perhaps less volatile. It could explain the reason why this 18Z model run was relatively consistent with the prior two runs. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I'm noticing right now, and this is supposed to be the radar at 9 o'clock, okay, and it looks to me like the NAM is actually underdone the precip shield that's with the from what we just saw on the radar and
right,
what it's supposed to look like, what it's supposed to look like at in about 50 minutes. It looks like that the NAM, as robust as the NAM has been, may be underdoing it. Now, not much is going to happen for the rest of the night. Dry air is supposed to cut this off, so I'm going to be curious to see if the model is overdoing that dry air. But this is where the snows rev up for tomorrow as the second coastal low develops off the Delaware coast. We rotate that around, and that band of heavy snow just pivots. We're now into Thursday morning, and out it goes. Now, the furthest west, this is, it gets into eastern Pennsylvania, all of New Jersey, the Hudson Valley. You can see the sharp cutoff to the north, the darker blues.
Right.
We do get into the heavy snows, and rather than, we could show the 10-to-1 snow maps, but it's the precip total that really has me, concerned, because it's a lot. We're talking 2 to 2.5 inches here in the white area. And a lot of what's over us, which is north of central New Jersey, is new stuff. There's old stuff, stuff that's falling now and overnight in the southern areas. But from central New Jersey northward, that's all yet to come down.
So in other words, what you're saying is that that white area, that's not a hole. That is, the precipitation has gotten so intense that the only color that they could choose to show or to demonstrate that is white.
Right, and thankfully it's not, as you look at the scale on the side, it's not those darker purples and the reds when you go up, because we don't want 3.5, 4 inches of liquid here.
No.
But if this were February and we saw this, I think we would have no problem going with a foot plus, or maybe even if we wanted
2
to be
feet.
brave, 2 feet.
Yeah.
It's the fact that we're dealing with a date. Some of that, not all. There's a good chunk of this that's going to fall when the sun angle is not going to be in play later tomorrow afternoon and for half of tomorrow night.
Right.
Half that precip is going to fall where the sun angle's not an issue.
Right.
So it's that first part of that storm, the snowfall tomorrow, that's going to be interesting to see what it puts down and what the impacts are with respect to time of day, temperature, and sun angle. But look, what we're basically doing is we've taken this and cut it in half. That's a pretty aggressive cut.
Right.
So, I would tend to think that we should be able to put down the amounts that we're forecasting.
As if 6 to 12 wasn't perhaps enough for some of our snow lovers out there, and look how sharp that band, that green band is,
right,
and the cutoff that cuts off right across. It looks like Dutchess County and on up into Ulster and Sullivan County, and to the north of there, if this is right, there ain't going to be nothing.
Right, and really quick, just want to show you the RJAM model. A little less on the precip, but still pretty robust with 2-inch plus liquid amounts in coastal New Jersey and touching Long Island. Certainly every bit of 1 inch to 1.5 inches of liquid being generated to the northwest of there. Looks like the half-inch line goes up as far north as the NAM did. And the GFS this afternoon, same thing. Also, actually, for the GFS, this is a pretty robust view.
Right.
With that half-inch line, I think it's even maybe a little bit further north. So,
right,
the models look very, very close to each other. It lends a certain amount of confidence to all this.
But the European, you don't often hear people poo-pooing the European.
I don't know what happened to what the European today was, basically was just, was fairly benign north and east of New York City. It was still pretty aggressive west and south, but with snow,
and it was even more
benign
benign
north and
last
east.
night. I said last night it looked a lot less fearsome and threatening than some of the short-term models, and it actually was a little bit more robust this afternoon, but still nothing to compare with the short-term model. So it makes one wonder what. And of course, the European was among the first to start pushing
Right.
the storm back to the north and west.
By the way, this I just pulled up. This is the high resolution RGEM model, which has done fairly well, and it is, also at the very least equally aggressive to the ones we just showed you, and in fact, it may even be a bit more aggressive than the RGEM and the GFS, and just under the NAM. I mean, it's got lots of areas there with 2+ inches of liquid, including over New York City and parts of Long Island, and even into southeastern Massachusetts, up to Boston, if this is correct. We can, I'll put the surface up here.
And the sad part about all this, sad from the standpoint of possibly power outages, and also clearing away this snow, is going to be the fact that this is going to be perhaps one of those 8-to-1 or 10-to-1 snowfalls, which means a very heavy, slushy type of consistency, which is enough maybe to bend tree branches or break tree limbs or bring down power lines. I think the one saving grace is that, at least from what I've looked at, it's not going to be the kind of wind that we've seen over the previous few nor'easters.
Right.
Certainly nothing like 65 or even 45 mile per hour winds. It may be more or less in the 25 to 35 range, but you tag that on with a very heavy snow that we're thinking of for tomorrow, and once again, those power lines could be coming down.
Here's the surface map for the high resolution RGEM, and this is at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Snowing just about everywhere. Look at those dark blue snows. Look at that band that it brings in from the south late tomorrow afternoon into tomorrow night. That's a really hefty looking band here. And it snows well into the night. This is at 7 a.m. on Thursday, and the
finally lets go.
Finally starting to let go at that point. We saw the precip, so we might as well look at what it does with snow amounts. I mean, this is 10-to-1, so it basically gives a fairly large area of 10 inches plus, which would kind of, might line up fairly well with what, with that precip map. If you want to be conservative and cut it back, it's basically cutting the amounts in half. Let's real quick, Joe, because we don't have a lot of time left. I just want to come back, just to give a quick hello to everybody. Excuse me, that's on the chat board tonight, and thank you all for being here. By the way, we really appreciate it greatly. Jason Schaefer, the RGEM has the bullseye further south than the NAM. Yeah, these models, each model is going to kind of key in on a different point. Right. I think the overall takeaway for me is the fact that it's aggressive. The models are very, very wet. So whether it's 1.25 inches or 1.5 inches, it's a lot of liquid.
Right. Anybody else on there? David Schwartz or?
Let's see. David Schwartz. So when the upper and surface low stack, can we get thunder snows?
I guess it's possible. I look for.
You wonder if that RGEM, that high resolution RGEM with that really dark blue band, maybe there might be something in there.
Right. There could be some low top convection embedded in that. But from comparison to what we had 2 weeks ago, and 2 weeks ago I would have put the mortgage money down that we were going to see thunder snows, and we certainly did. This one does not appear. It seems more stretched out as opposed to that very tight type of energy box that we had a couple of weeks ago. But still, it's possible. There could be quite a bit of lifting, and we could get some, maybe not explosive thunder like we were getting reports of 2 weeks ago, but maybe some grumbly type of thunder.
Right.
Maybe a momentary flash here and there. But I don't really see the outbreak of convective activity like we had 2 weeks ago with this pattern.
Daniel Van Letten, Joe, is this storm going to create its own cold air through dynamic cooling to aid in the storm totals? It's a good question.
The
vertical motions are certainly there. I mean, they're very strong. There will be some dynamic cooling, and the air being already cold is helpful.
Right.
For snow accumulation.
We need the dynamics. We need that to overwhelm, so to speak, that high angle of the sun. And it has been done before. Again, case in point, April 6, 1982, the sun was much higher up then as opposed to where it is right now. And still, New York City ended up with 9.6 inches of snow. And I do remember there was thunderstorms with that snow event. So again, everything is going to be hinging on dynamics and just how intense the precipitation comes down. Because if we have a storm that's long duration but light to occasionally moderate, that's just not going to do it. We need moderate to heavy, and I think that there's a fair chance that we could see that after noon or 1 or 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon.
Just real fast, Joe, because a few people have asked me about this grand solar minimum idea. Looking for 6 times the variability in the next several years before weather settles down cooler and cloudier. What is you're the astronomy guy here, so quick comment on that.
The quick comment is that we had a period from 1645 to 1715 where there were hardly any sunspots, and that coincided with what is known in the weather annals as the Little Ice Age. And so people automatically said, well, the lack of sunspots or solar activity automatically means that we're going to have a spell of unseasonably cold weather. I spoke several years ago with Gavin Schmidt at NASA about this, and he completely wiped that clean and said, don't concentrate on the solar activity. During that time, 1645 to 1715, there was an unusual amount of volcanic activity, which threw up volcanic ash, aerosol clouds, which helped to reflect the sunlight back into space and helped to lower the temperatures. So, it may, some still believe that solar activity is connected, but I will say this: we had a very, very flat solar activity period a few years ago. The last solar minimum, around 2011, 2012, there was hardly any sunspots for a very long period of time, kind of like a reminder of the so-called Maunder minimum of 1640 to 1715, and we still managed to get, we still have the global warming that we've spoken about. And,
well, that was an El Nino year.
I mean, if there was, it was an El Nino year too, and that certainly mitigated any cooling or whatever. I think that we still have to see whether or not that solar activity is a connection. There are people who firmly believe in that, and there are others, and Gavin Schmidt, for example, of NASA is one of them, that says don't bother. The sun activity doesn't really have that much. It's not that much of a player in terms of overall climate. So let's see.
Okay.
Contentious issue.
Great. All right. So here's what's going on. 9:15. For those of you who want to join us, we'll be on Facebook on tonight. Meteorologist Joe Cioffi, and also on Joe Rao's Facebook page, Joe Rao Weather. So go to either one, but go to his if you do it. Go to his and like his page. If you've already liked mine, you can go ahead and watch it on his page. All right, and we'll be back. Later tonight, I may jump in with a quick live stream after the new NAM comes out, and we've got the new SREFs, and we'll see what they have to offer. Not that there's anything really going on that we have to look at.
Well, this is going to be the last time we'll look at run, because once we get into tomorrow, you stop looking at the runs and you start looking at what's actually happening.
Right.
Nowcasting.
Right.
There are a lot of forecasters who still look at the models coming out and they try to say, oh well, the NAM just came out with this and that. Forget about that. After it starts, you just concentrate on what is happening, and that's how you make your updates and changes if there need be any.
Totally agreed. All right, folks, have a great evening. Facebook at 9:15, maybe on YouTube again tonight at about 11 o'clock.